Hi. This video is going to be unscripted, so I really don't know what I'm going to say. I just had a few minutes, so I thought I'll bring the camera out to the garden. I'm going to start a small series on different ways of making money out of your garden. It doesn't matter whether you've got a large garden or a small one, and there's even things that you can make money of with gardening and plants that don't even need a garden. So I'll go over some of those things in the next few weeks. Today we're going to talk about growing flowers, fresh flowers. You can grow flowers, if you've got some room, you can grow all sorts of flowers to sell at markets or from your gate, your home gate, if you're allowed to, depending on your council regulations. You can sell to local florists. There's a lot of ways you can sell flowers. I really like taking them to markets in bunches, but I also sell a few flowers to my local florist. I live in a very tiny town, so I've only got one little florist and only needs a couple of bunches a week. It's enough to put a few dollars in my pocket to buy a treat every now and then. But if you're going to sell to florists, you really need to go around a heap of them and ask, what do you want, and tell them what you want to grow and if they'd be interested in them. For me, I have a stock. Every year I just grow things like statice and chrysanthemums, yarrow, and this year I've got some carnations in. And other things really depend on what you like to grow and what you find out from your local florist what they would want. When I first went around to florists to ask what they want, because we live far from capital cities, I found that a lot of them were interested in locally grown flowers because they were very fresh. They didn't come in boxed, and they found that after a lot of travel and that, the flowers didn't look as fresh as they wanted. And they were also after some of the more unusual showy flowers that are really expensive to get, like what's bird of paradise plant flower, things like that. And I have to admit, growing perennial flowers like bird of paradise and that, gypsophila, some of the other perennials, is a really good way to make some money from your garden without a whole lot of work. As long as you keep them weeded, you can just keep them in their beds, and they're there year after year. You know exactly when they're flowering, exactly when they're ready to pick. But anyway, let's have a look at the few flowers I've got in this year. Two of my favourite flowers to grow are statice, because every florist wants it because it's a great filler, and celosia, especially the coxcombs and that, because it's expensive for florists to get and they love it. And even if you can't sell it to florists, taking it in bunches to markets, you just sell out really quickly. This is statice, as most of you would already know. It's great as a fresh flower, but if you have leftover flowers that you can't sell, just hang them up in bunches and dry them. It really dries well, and it keeps its colour for months, or even I've got a bunch of flowers in the house, in the kitchen, that's been there for over 2 years. Flowers are just like when I first dried them. A lot of other flowers can also be dried and keep their colour, like yarrow and celosia, straw flowers. So they're really good as a backup. I have to admit that I was really disappointed last year when a florist asked for dried flowers, and I found that she didn't actually know much about flowers. She said she'd been a florist for 5 years and didn't know that celosia and statice and that could be dried. Never heard of yarrow. And when I tried to educate her on some of these flowers, she just didn't want to know. She didn't want to look it up. I sent her some pictures of yarrow, and she said, "Oh no, you can't dry that." And for somebody who doesn't know a lot about their industry and their own business, I found that really sad. But it's not unusual. When I went around to florists first to ask about what sort of flowers they wanted, I suggested a few. I said, I can grow Xanthodecia calla lilies. And one florist said, "Oh no, they're death flowers." And it really made me sad to think that people still think that. It's been decades since even the big white calla lilies were thought of as death flowers, and the small coloured ones are very popular as wedding flowers. But I found that a lot, and it's you will find that a lot of florists do understand and research flowers, but there are also an awful lot, too many, that just rely on a few flowers that they know and don't even take the time to research others. Sometimes you just got to work with what they tell you, and if they say, "I want this kind of flower," just go with it. If you want to grow that, well, that's great. I've got a small... Ooh. I've got this small bed of carnations just coming out in flower now. If you want to grow flowers, you do have to realise that if you can't put them under cover, like many of the big professional growers, it does limit to some extent what you can grow, because there are some flowers that just don't do as good outside and you won't get the money for them. I decided to put in carnation... I can't think. I decided not to put in the big showy single stem carnations because they're really suited for growing indoors in controlled environments. But these multi-stemmed types look great as fillers in posies, and florists can always use them in their work. You won't get as much money for them, but you can pick them for longer. They produce more flowers. I like them. They have better scent. But it's up to you what you want to grow. You just have to research every single flower, research when they're ready to pick. Like with carnations, when there's 1 or 2 carnations out, then the whole stem is ready to pick on these. With the statice, they're ready to pick when all the flowers are out. Each flower has its own differences that you have to learn about. It's not that hard though once you get into it. Let's see. Trying to think of some more things to talk about. But anyway, so for our first episode in this series of making money out of your garden, if you've got room, selling fresh or dried bunches of flowers is a really good idea because you have a number of different ways of selling them. And as long as you keep them weeded and watered, they're really not that difficult to grow. Of course, your chrysanthemums are always a great perennial flower. They don't flower for a huge long period. Oops, I just bent that off. Anyway, once you get to know how to grow them, when to prune them so you get flowers at the right time. If you've got flowers on Mother's Day, you can go to a market and just sell out really quickly. I prefer to sell mixed bunches of flowers rather than same colours, and they just go like crazy. Remember to put a good price on them. You want to make a reasonable profit for yourself. Like all businesses, don't sell yourself short. Don't try and be the cheapest. Make sure that your prices reflect the true cost of selling, plus all the incidental costs around it. And you also want to make a profit so that you can expand, or you have some extra money in case something goes wrong, because we all have bad seasons. So yeah, so chrysanthemums are a good easy care plant, and the flowers sell really well both to florists and at markets. That's all the flowers I've got in this year. I haven't got any yarrow in, and I was going to grow a few other types of flowers, but I just didn't have the room now that the farm's gone and I'm sort of in a backyard now. But it just takes a couple of years to work out how much you can grow, what you want to grow, what sells, and go from there. It's a really good extra income. Remember, of course, that if you have little spare bits in your garden where you've got nothing growing, you can also grow fillers for florists. Look, I've got a young corkscrew willow here growing. When that gets bigger, sometimes florists really like the summer and the winter branches of corkscrew willow. And there's other types of foliage plants as well as flowers that you can sell relatively easy. And if you don't sell them, they look great in the garden anyway. One thing I don't recommend beginners start to grow is roses. Roses are a specialty plant, and you have to know what you're doing before you start growing them. Maybe a couple of years after you start selling other types of flowers, you might want to just play around with roses. But honestly, they're a pain in the butt, and they really need some expertise, especially to grow them good enough for florists. Okay then, so that is the end of this episode. Next episode we'll go into selling pot plants from your garden. Oh, just got bitten. So I'm hoping you learnt a little bit today. I'm sorry it was just short. Now before I go, I need to point out a couple of things. One is, if you're going to grow flowers for florists, make sure that you're reliable. If they're expecting so many bunches of this and that flower every week on this particular day, make sure you can supply. Don't agree to things that you may not be able to supply. And the second thing is, don't try to be everything to everyone. Grow a few flowers that you know you can grow, that you like growing, and after a year or two you want to expand, add another couple. Don't try and grow everything that everyone wants. Tell them what you have, they can choose what to buy from you. I'm sorry, it's a bit short and I wasn't very clear in what I was saying, but I hope you got something out of it anyway. So I will see you in the next video.